it is hard to predict precisely how the evolution is gonna sort of evolve. But if you look at the snapshot today and look at how the Chinese people are looking at the government, I say while obviously just like people in another country, many of the Chinese people will have criticism towards the Chinese government, but by and large, with respect to the development, in particular economic development, that China has gone through in the last couple of decades, I would say the Chinese people has been very supportive of the Chinese government's policies and what they have been able to achieve in terms of lifting the living standards of the Chinese. Over time, one would expect that as the Chinese people become wealthier, and many of them will go outside of China, they become more worldly. You would expect that there is going to be some more feedback from the Chinese people on how the Chinese government ought to be conducted. And in fact, within the Chinese government, they also do recognize that in fact things cannot be sort of stagnant, or it cannot be just stay where it is today. And there is always a lot of discussions within the Chinese government as to how the government ought to be changed over time. But unlikely we're going to see a drastic change overnight. We're probably going to see a gradual evolution. And in fact, right now, within the Communist Party, there's quite a bit discussion about the so-called internal democracy. In other words, creating some competition internally within the party on certain key posts of the assignments. And we expect this evolution will continue to happen. Yeah, certainly anytime you own money from other people, it's always an issue. I think it goes without saying at the country level as well. From the Chinese standpoint, Chinese obviously see that it's a way to invest their money. At the same time, Chinese also a bit concerned whether or not we're putting too much within one basket. But at the same time, are there any other sort of better alternatives? One also needs to argue. So it's a bit of a tenuous situation. But Chinese always sort of reviewing or monitoring, how we should making our investments. I think most of the Chinese would expect that China will continue to rise in the next couple of decades, overall speaking, economically and perhaps geopolitically. For the Chinese, we believe that for centuries in the past, we've been in the center of the world. In fact, China in Chinese means the Middle Kingdom, that we are in the middle of the world. Rightly or wrongly, that's the belief. And so this is a current or recent rise of China is, for many Chinese, is just the way that we get back to where we ought to be. But the relationship between China and the rest world, in particular US, needs to be cast within the context of what I talk about in my book, which is Open China. China actually is a relatively open society. China has tremendous motives of wanting to integrate into the rest of the world. And the relationship with the US, for example, I think, is a very different type of relationship compared to, let's say, the US and the Soviet Union relationship in the Cold War era, or even, when Japan was also rising in the 80s, the relationship in the US and Japan. I think today, if you look at China and US, a lot of interests are quite intertwined. There's a lot of mutual interests. Of course, there are differences as well. And that's a reason that's to be expected. But at the same time, there's tremendous amount of intertwined interest between the two countries, in particular in terms of businesses, that in fact, as China continues to rise, China will have to learn about how to play more effectively in the global geopolitical world. But at the same time, it's not like China would have to sort of threaten or sort of rival itself with the US. I don't think that is the motive.